Hey friends, welcome back to Birds of a Feather Talk Together. This week we are talking to Nick Mason about the Horned Lark. Nick is an assistant professor in the Department of Biological Sciences and curator of birds at the Museum of Natural Science at LSU. Nick was so much fun to talk to and has so many connections to John and Shannon through LSU. Nick is widely considered one of the top experts in the world on horned larks, so this was truly an honor to have him on. Horned larks were also just named the ABA Bird of the Year, so that's pretty cool timing too. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. So with that, let's grab our binoculars and let's get into it. Welcome back, everyone. We're excited to have Nick Mason joining us this week. So hi, Nick. How's it going?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on. It's great to meet you, RJ and Amanda.
Meet you.
Yes, I know you have a relationship with John and Shannon that you guys go way back. So I don't know where we want to start. If Nick, you want to tell us how you know John and Shannon, or start with just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I think of John and Shannon as kind of the cool aunt and uncle for me because Kevin Burns, who was on the show earlier, was my master's advisor. And so I know John and Shannon well through the ornithology world. I think the last time I saw John was at the AOS meeting. We were at an after party for one of the conferences. Then Shannon, I don't think I've seen since AOS Chicago, which was like 2015. And so it's been a long time, but
Yeah,
we're
I've
sort of,
soured a little bit on many meetings. To be honest, the degree of misogyny and rudeness was something I just didn't want to deal with after a while.
yeah.
And so then I decided I was just going to go to meetings where I didn't know anybody and learn completely new things. And so I've been to places with venture capitalists speaking who I've never spent any time around people like that, where I was the only scientist. And I've been to other museum meetings, which are pretty interesting too, where it was mostly museum people, exhibit design, marketing people, but then me as a scientist, which was really pretty fun too and very different, where I was kind of like the weird novelty item at those meetings. Like, oh, you actually do research in a museum? I'm like, yep, I do. So I was kind of weird in that sense. I don't know. I've always felt like learning new things is fun. When I would go to bird meetings or any other meetings scientifically, I'd always go to sessions where I didn't know anything about the topic.
Mhm.
You never know where some interesting idea is going to come from, But I do miss seeing some of my friends, but other people I do not miss seeing.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah. I can't say I've ever been to a venture capitalist meeting, but yeah,
Oh,
I'm
those
going
people are
to
crazy. They don't live in the same
imagine. Yeah.
world that we live in at all. And the things that they value are kind of like way off. But now one of my favorite interns works for someone who does that, but she's working in the nature sphere, trying to
Hmm.
integrate engineering design, saving the environment, all of these really interesting things. And now she's going to all the places and she's meeting all the people that we know. So she's sending me
Mhm.
pictures with Allison Schultz, for example, or with
Nice. Yeah.
Alex Dagan, who used to be a graduate student here in CEB, who's now owns uh, his own conservation company. So now all of these pathways kind of like they cross each other. So Nick and John and I cross each other in that way too, with all these, interconnections. Now, were you still
Yeah.
an undergraduate the first time we met you?
I was a master's student at that time for the
R-
2015 meeting. So that's when I was
No,
at San Diego
before
State
that
with
though.
Kevin Burns.
We met you before when you were deciding to go.
So this is what happens, Nick, is you get these weird memories of things going back to childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, his
You
childhood,
might
not
be
ours,
right.
John.
Yeah.
Should we go further back then, Nick?
Yeah.
Where did the path that you're
Sure.
on? How did you get there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm from Minnesota originally, and I'm not like a day one birder in terms of ornithology and birding. I didn't actually discover this as a career path until I would say relatively late. I was always interested in science, and so I did my undergrad at Vassar College in New York, and that's like a liberal arts school. And so, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but always loved nature, and wasn't until sort of a semester abroad in Costa Rica that I was really solidified in wanting to study zoology. But at that point, I hadn't really figured out what type of animal I was going to focus on or study. And so it wasn't until my master's that I really kind of got into ornithology. And from there, it's sort of been what I've dedicated my life to. And so, I've been really lucky to have some great mentorship and opportunities. And I did a PhD at Cornell after a master's at San Diego with Kevin Burns, one of the former guests on the show. And then I started here at LSU, Louisiana State University, in fall 2020. And so here, I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Biological Sciences, but I'm also a curator of birds at the Museum of Natural Sciences at LSU. So LSU has a really amazing legacy in terms of contributions to ornithology. A lot of amazing people have come through LSU, including John and Shannon. And so
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's an exciting
it's almost
place
baseball season.
You're right. Yeah, and they're the defending national champions too.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I think
We
people are
used
excited
to
about
go.
that.
We used to go to baseball games all the time because that's when they first started getting really good. Ben McDonald and people like that there. And it was before the stadium was renovated. So it was a pretty nice place to go and spend a few hours in the spring.
Down the hill
Yeah,
from the
it's a really-
museum.
That's right. You can walk over there, and it's a pretty nice stadium for college baseball. It's a fun way to spend an afternoon. So I'm sort of in the museum world along with John and Shannon in museum-based ornithology, and think about a lot of the same things. And so I really enjoy listening to this show. It's got a great combination of expertise with John and Shannon, but then sort of more conversational element that RJ and Amanda, you guys bring. And I guess with my path, not getting into birding necessarily until my master's, I find a lot of the conversations sort of parallel some of the thoughts that I had when I was first starting out. So I really like that aspect of it.
Thanks. That's so nice, Nick.
Yeah.
Where are you
Sometimes Amanda-
sitting, Nick?
Oh, I'm in my office in Foster Hall. So I'm on the LSU campus currently. So you can.
But where in
got a
the
couple
building are you?
specimens in the background? Right next to the collection on the first floor.
So
This
are you
was
still
Van's
in
old office.
Van's old office? It didn't look like that when
Mhm.
Van was
Yep.
in there.
Yeah, a little bit different. Yeah, Van had a ton of preprints and a lot of like these little index cards that pre-eBird
yeah.
were used to record and report rare bird sightings. And so we're in the
Including,
process of digitizing those right now.
do you put salmon index cards in people's mailbox? Did you keep that tradition?
I do not. Maybe I should bring it back, but
No,
for
you
RJ
don't
and
need
Amanda,
to.
So
You don't
this
need
is
to.
this is
So
this
who's
is
it? What's
this is the story here is that Van is one of the. I mean, he was both on Shannon and Mike our committees, dissertation committees, and he's longtime curator of birds, and he's taken a great pride in the curation and of that collection. So he catalogs everything when it comes in. And when he makes a mistake on that, when you make a mistake on a tag, you find out about it. And as somebody who has probably some of the worst handwriting in the history of ornithology, I have a big stack of these salmon cards that Van used to hand out when he went through and found all these mistakes on your labels.
Yeah, so you'd find it in your mailbox,
which you
right?
which you go back and correct.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
So if
That's a
you
little
Bummer.
passive
prepared
aggressive.
specimens,
Yeah, that's
and-
stressful.
Oh
Man.
my God, it wasn't
Jeez.
passive. Just
It was
A
just
part,
aggressive.
the
aggressive.
part.
Yeah.
It was effective.
yeah, very effective. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hilarious. Jeez Louise. Nick,
Yeah,
what
so I don't do this. I don't do the salmon cards necessarily, but we're still doing a lot of specimen prep and a lot of training of graduate students and undergraduates and how to do museum-based ornithology expeditions and collecting and curation and research and all of that.
So now you've
Sorry, I
been
think
doing
I
this
might have
for
interrupted you.
now you've been doing this for a few years. What is some of the big takeaways of things you've learned over the last 5 years? Then
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think there's a lot to do in a museum. The work is sort of never done in a way, and maybe just in research and academia in general. I think that's both a blessing and then also a challenge in that, there's always something new to do, but trying to figure out how to prioritize what needs to be done in a collection, how to help train and manage people. It takes a whole team, a whole community to have a museum like the Field Museum or the LSU Museum operate. And so that's been something that I didn't necessarily have training in, right? Like, so my background is in research and in science, but a lot of it now is sort of working as a team, helping teams of people and being sort of people centric in that way, and helping train and develop the next generation of scientists. And so that's been sort of a little bit of a learning curve. I had my experience and what worked well for me, but figuring out how to help other individuals and what might adjust for different people, that kind of a thing has been something new I've learned in those 5 years. Yeah, and I had done a little bit of international fieldwork, but doing more international fieldwork has given me a true appreciation for how difficult and challenging some of that can be in many different ways. The Museum of Natural Sciences here has this huge legacy of fieldwork, and John and Shannon, I think y'all participated in multiple expeditions while you were here, probably. Yeah, just the time on the ground is really challenging, but then all the logistics in terms of exporting and importing, and that's all changing constantly with turnover and the people on both sides, both U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but also in the countries where we're working, like Peru and Bolivia. So, I sort of knew that was a challenge, but just how dynamic and how challenging that is has kind of been realized for me, I guess, in the past few years since joining LSU.
What's
Yeah, I
the
think one of the-
funnest thing you do? What do you like the most
The
now?
funnest thing, I still think it's the field work. I mean, the field work is so exciting. In my day to day, I end up spending a lot of time on email and in meetings, and those are great too. But I really do enjoy, living in a tent, waking up, and knowing that day I'm going to be watching birds and working with birds, and I can put my email responder on, and I don't have to look at my computer. I can just sort of really engage in being in nature and thinking about evolution and ecology, and that's really, to me, I think, my favorite part.
Awesome.
John, what's your
Yeah.
favorite part of doing this job?
What Nick said.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
It doesn't get any better than that.
I was going to say, that sounds pretty good. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's something
Yeah.
I never get to
Yeah.
do that in my job.
Me neither. I'm just
You
turning
guys are
off
lucky.
exactly, not having to respond to email. You had me at that.
Yeah, right. Getting paid
Yeah.
not to respond to email.
Yeah, it's like the biggest worry or concern often is like, oh, what are we gonna have for lunch, or what's on the house for
Oh.
dinner, and then
That's the best.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah,
Shannon,
just-
what's your favorite part?
Realizing how much hope spending time with 20-year-olds can give you, and how important it is to see the world through, and I mean the world really broadly, through other people's eyes. And spending so much time with graduate students has really taught me that. I had a high school internship program until COVID kind of changed everything. But I used to spend time with 16-year-olds and think, I mean, these kids are smart, committed, dedicated, fun, interesting. I don't find them unengaged. I don't find them overly cynical or anything like that. And I feel like spending time like that reverse ages you. So it makes you younger and younger and younger, especially as you get older and older and older, to spend time with people and to watch them grow and develop and see them in their careers. For me, I think that's the most rewarding aspect. And that wouldn't have been something I said before. I wouldn't have known how important that was. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. If you want to feel better about the
Yeah,
world,
that's great.
spend time with some 20-year-olds. You'll feel a lot better than you will spending time with 60-year-olds like me and John, which will depress you. So, except don't spend too much time with 10-year-olds in the hockey rink in Indiana, because then you'll just be completely shocked at little kids' behavior. But generally, I
That's
just
funny.
think it's so much fun to see people from all over the world coming. I mean, that's the great thing about a collection. I mean, Nick experiences this, we do too, that people come from all over the world to work in the collection, drawn by the specimens, but you get to take so much advantage of having all these different people around. There's new opportunities for collaboration. You get to walk down the hall and go see who's at the table that day and say, "What are you doing?" And they'll usually blow your mind with what they're actually doing. Stuff you never heard of or never thought of before. So
Yeah,
specimens.
the community aspect is really beautiful.
Kevin Burns has a plan for every. He has a contingency plan for everything. I've never met anybody like that who could plan for things that were way outside the realm of anything possible. And he would have a plan. It's like, but then again, when it came to bears, his plan was the flashlight in the tent. I'm like, Kevin, you have a plan for a flood, a biblical flood coming. Freaking flashlight? Are you kidding me? How can that be your plan? But
Where was that,
That's
Shannon?
hilarious.
Where
in the
was that bear?
Sierras of California for the
Oh my gosh.
few years that we
Kevin.
spent tenting together, where we saw a mountain lion laying across the dirt road right by our tent, where we woke up one day and there were so many cows in this Forest Service land. I didn't know people did that you let out, that people could let their cows out in Forest Service land. Well, we woke up and there were probably 50 cows standing around our tent, you know.
Wow.
That was not anything I ever thought, but Kevin always has contingency plans. He's always like thinking all of these things ahead in these really weird ways, which is why I have, some mementos of that in my office of things that Kevin's given me. The scaredest I've ever been was with a moose. So he gave me a moose, a little stuffed animal moose that came in a can, but I almost died because I got between a mommy moose and a baby moose. And the mommy moose snorted at me. I was frozen to the ground. I would have been absolutely useless in the event of that crisis. If I had to help someone else, I would have moved. But I was rooted to the spot, thinking that these were my last moments of life.
Ugh.
And Kevin was standing above me on a ridge, looking down on me, thinking these were my last moments of life as well. Then the mommy moose the baby moose moved a little bit, and they both kind of united just a few feet from me, and then the mommy moose left me alone. But goodness gracious.
Yikes, that's a
What has
dangerous
scared
spot to
you the
be in.
most?
Yeah.
What has scared you the most, Nick? Where have you?
Scared me the most? Honestly, I think it's like people more than the beasts or animals, for lack of a better term. Yeah, for me, it's sort of more I'm concerned about like interactions with people when we're out in these areas where we don't always know where we are, to be honest.
Yeah, when somebody drives up and you haven't seen anybody for a couple of days, you always wonder,
Like, wait, who is this?
yeah, what do they want? No, I was going to say one of the legacies at LSU is this long, incredible record of doing field work, primarily in South America, but all over now. And one of the great things is they've always had a whole bunch of tremendous people that kind of you're introduced to in the field. So that can help train you. And so the new people that come along, there's just a really the ethos of saying, we're gonna get you into the field, but you're not on your own, is a really been a tremendous thing at LSU over the years.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the international expeditions rely heavily on collaborations with people from those countries.
These days now,
And
yeah.
I mean, it's essential, right? And both in terms of their knowledge, but also trying to help build infrastructure and capacity for ornithologists from those countries to do the science that we're all interested in as well. But yeah, many of the relationships that LSU has built have been like decades long involvement from people in Peru or Bolivia, Brazil, other countries in South and Central America that are essential to the safety and kind of, training and logistics of these expeditions that are the core of what the museum does in terms of collections growth and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've always liked to watch the students when they come back from an expedition like that, because it really is transformative. I mean, I've barely been out of the country. Well, I've barely been out of Canada when I moved to the US, and then I've never really done anything. And then all of a sudden I was in Costa Rica, and I even though I can't believe I didn't think I couldn't do what I did, because I should have believed that I couldn't do what I did. I should have never thought I could have done it. But, there were a bunch of people with me helping. And so, then you figure out what part of it you're good at and you do that part.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm really good at driving a minivan in the middle of nowhere so that men by myself, so that men remember you 2 years from then and say, "Oh, she's the gringa who did that." Yep, that was me. But that was before GPS too. I can't believe I actually did that. I had a much better memory back then, for how
Yeah,
to get
that's
in and
crazy
out
to
of
think
places.
about. Yeah, that's crazy to think about doing all these expeditions pre cell phones,
Yeah.
pre internet. I can't even imagine what that would be like.
Well, I mean, as you know, there are lots of stories of people getting lost on trails in the Andes and
Yeah.
not getting to camp because they went on the wrong fork. And
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Mhm.
well, it's a great legacy.
Although
It's,
I think the scaredest I've ever been has been in pine forests in Louisiana, where it was there's no topography, right? So I'm used to knowing where the mountains are, and here where the lake is. You can almost always tell where the lake is. But this was just like a sea of the same trees.
Oh.
And
Mhm.
I had no idea where I was. None. Have
Yeah.
you guys been in a place like that, RJ and Amanda, where you had no idea where you were?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, we've done like hiking out in Colorado, but you're always kind of on the trail.
see,
Right.
I
you can
think,
see the
yeah,
mountains. You got
Exactly.
a little bit
Yeah.
to see. This is
yeah,
Burr River. Yeah.
yeah. I think like you're saying, when you're in the trees, that's when you really get, you lose your sense of like where everything is and have I
Right.
seen this before?
Yeah.
So no, I don't think to that extent. No.
Me neither. Yeah. That sounds like
Mhm.
something else. Yeah.
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 Nick, I see behind you is there a bird with Mardi Gras beads?
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
no
yeah.
way.
It's one of the traditions here is to adorn our mounts with Mardi Gras beads. Yeah, this is a fulvous whistling duck that's sporting some gold Mardi Gras beads.
What did that bird have to do for those beads?
You don't
Not
ask.
very
Yeah.
much.
What happens in New Orleans stays in New Orleans.
Okay.
Amanda.
Okay.
I have Mardi Gras beads all over things in my office too. A little LSU tiger that John gave me is adorned with Mardi Gras beads. The moose that Kevin Burns gave me is adorned with Mardi Gras beads.
You can't get
Yeah.
rid of them.
My pencil sharpener is adorned with Mardi Gras beads, and who uses a pencil sharpener these days? So it's a good place to hang things from.
The phrase I always think of is "throw me something stupid, mister."
Wait, John, tell us more. What?
Well, just when you go down to you're sitting there at watching the crews go by on Mardi Gras, and you're just trying to get them to toss stuff to you. So everybody's, and they eventually do.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's awesome.
wasn't
You're
it Kevin
persistent.
Burns who got the coconut? Like the prize
Zulu.
thing from the Zulu parade?
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah, those are the prized throws at Zulu. You get a coconut that's customly painted for
Oh
every
my gosh.
year,
Whoa.
and they can't throw out the coconuts anymore because that's a
Right.
liability. And
I
so
was gonna say
they have to
be
hand you the
prepared.
coconut.
Okay, you don't toss that too hard.
Not that liability is really an issue.
Yeah, it's sort of a secondary thought for sure. Maybe.
A bunch of the baseball players are on the float throwing out coconuts at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So do you like New Orleans a lot? Has it been a fun place
Yeah,
to,
it's great.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's very special. I mean, Louisiana and Southern Louisiana in particular. LSU is the main campus is on Baton Rouge, in Baton Rouge, which is capital Louisiana. But then 15 minutes away to the south is New Orleans, and New Orleans is unlike any other city I've ever been. If you haven't visited, I highly encourage you to. It's really fun in terms of music, culture, food. I feel like people are friendly in general. And so, you can just kind of walk around and meet people and have a great time. So yeah, the architecture, everything about it is unique compared to any other city I've been to. So it's an awesome place to have just a short drive away. And it's yeah, there's a saying maybe that John and Shannon know, that there's 4 seasons in Louisiana. There's football, there's Mardi Gras, there's festival season, and then there's air conditioning. And so we're now transitioning between Mardi Gras and festival season.
Oh, cool.
So, there's a very vibrant sort of festive culture in general that I really appreciate and enjoy. It's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Jeez
Those are
Louise.
some of my funnest memories too, is going to all the festivals. Just everybody's outside, there's music, people are dancing, there's kids running around, happy kids running around, not kids saying bad things to hockey players. But yeah, and it was really like that. That's why I wasn't prepared for what the ball drop was like in New York City, because I just expected it would be like a Mardi Gras thing and people would be happy and there would be costumes and laughing and beads or some New York City version of that. But that is not what the ball drop in Manhattan was like. Not for me, at least. I was scared at the ball drop in Manhattan because people were, it wasn't so pleasant and people weren't so nice. And then again, it was one of the biggest disappointments I ever had, because when you're a kid, for me at least, staying up and watching the ball drop was a really big deal. And to see that it was like a beach ball dropped from a crane on the top of a roof, and then they turn everything off, and you're like, what? That's it? You kidding me? There's got to be more to this experience than that, because it looks so. I thought that ball was, I don't know, the size of a small house or something. I didn't, but it was not. Have you been to a
Looks
ball
bigger
drop
on
or anything
TV.
like that, Nick? Have you been to anything like that? Yeah.
I haven't, no. Yeah, but I could see how it might appear bigger on TV than in real life. I could see that.
So
Stick to
one thing
Louisiana
about
festivals. They're
Louisiana,
more fun.
circling back to birds, is you guys get spring a lot earlier than we do. So what's going
That's
on
right.
now?
Yeah. Yeah. So I just heard our first Mississippi kite on campus.
Cool.
To me, that's one of the signs, at least here in Louisiana, that the breeding birds are on their way back. And so, our earliest migrants are even in February, like purple martins coming back from the Amazon will show up starting in February. And now we're kind of at the beginning of the main thrust, I would say, but there's still really the kind of peak migration is going to be sort of late March and April. So it's still just kind of getting going here. But you can go out and see birds starting to establish territories. The resident birds are kind of ramping up in terms of their breeding season. Yeah, I mean, being on the Mississippi Flyway, we get a really, really good migration. And John and Shannon, I don't know if you ever had a chance to go see like the dropout migratory fallout on like the Gulf Coast. But one of the really cool things here is the southwestern parishes and some of the just sheer numbers of birds and migrants you can see that show up during spring migration after flying across the Gulf of Mexico. And they're just completely exhausted. And so you can see trees littered with tons of birds, huge diversity. So hopefully we're going to get a chance to go see that. It's hard for me to go see those because I teach during the spring. It's sometimes hard to get time away. But yeah, it's starting now, but it'll kind of ramp up in the coming weeks.
And it's interesting because Baton Rouge is inland, and Baton Rouge is okay for migration, but you get down along the coast and it's completely different in terms of the numbers landing on the coast. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Just the sheer sort of abundances that you get, and not to be too much of a doomer or depressing, but talking to folks from like Van and people from other generations, the numbers have declined too. And there was just that recent study that came out highlighting the bird declines, and Louisiana was one of the states that they mentioned where there's been sort of the accelerating declines of birds. And that's after that big Labovo study came out a few years ago on 3 point something billion birds that have been lost over the past 50 years.
I'm a glasses half full person, and I'm still
Shocking.
wondering whether some of that isn't. I don't know. I mean, the example I always give is that when I worked in Manaus in the Amazon basin, I came back after 6 months there where they had tried to isolate these forest fragments and tried to burn them and to get pasture. And if you don't get a good wet season or a good dry season, you can't get a good burn. So one of the areas I was in, I went back the next year and the second growth was already 2 meters tall. And what that taught me was that Amazonian forest has a lot of capacity to bounce back. And I heard this seminar not long after that by a major conservation biologist who said that all Amazonian forest is going to be gone by the year 2000. And that didn't happen.
Right.
And here we are, 2025. And I'm not saying that there isn't a lot going on, but where I'm going with this is with some of these birds, I really think we're going to have to, I mean, it shows you we have to keep monitoring. And so this recent study that says that things are going based on the breeding bird survey data, I'm not saying I doubt the scientific validity of what they're putting out there. It's just that I think that we have the capacity to see these populations actually bounce back in ways that I think could be good. You know, if we listen to what's going on, we could make changes that'll make a big difference.
Yeah. What country do you live in, John? I think the listening ears have been turned
not a
off.
leader right now. We got a lot of data saying things are going bad. We just have to convince our government to actually listen to us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to convince the people on the ground to force the government into doing something about it. Because if you wait for politicians to do something, you're going to die waiting. But I have a lot more faith in people forcing politicians to do the right thing. So, question of how you get people to actually stand up for that. They have to understand what happens when you lose biodiversity. And I think that's museums are great for that. When you bring people in and you show them things close up and you tell them that there are only a third of the number of birds like this than there were 50 years ago, you can get people's attention. And then you give them something to do. What do you do? So then you help them know what you do after that. But I don't think you can wait for a politician to do something. Good God, you kidding me?
So let's use this as a transition and talk about a bird who, in my opinion, is something Nick is one of the world's experts on that happens to be, in theory, doing pretty well for the most part. And given what it does for a living, this is the horned lark. I think it's kind of an amazing story.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting species for a lot of different ways. I think from purely a birding perspective, it might not be the most striking bird in terms of its plumage or sometimes in terms of like the habitat in which you find horned larks. But if you zoom out and think a bit about the kind of evolutionary ecological story that encapsulates horned larks as a whole lineage, it's really pretty fascinating what's happened with them and how successful they've been at adopting and acclimating to different types of habitats throughout their whole range. So they're on every continent except for Australia and Antarctica. It's super widespread. I think it might be the species with the highest number of subspecies. I'm not 100% certain on that because there was the island thrush, but that got split into, I don't know, like 20, 30 odd species now.
Unfortunately, the international code folks axed all the subspecies that Harold Hansen tried to create of Canada geese. that would have beaten it, but it's not close.
Okay.
So how did you start with horned larks? You worked on tanagers, right, for your master's thesis. And then
so it was also during my master's. I was fortunate enough to get some financial support to go to the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology at UC Berkeley. And there I worked with Rory Bowie and Carlos Cicero on horned larks, but mostly on the Channel Islands, which are a group of islands off the coast of California. And so we were interested in studying their population connectivity between the mainland. And it's one of these systems where the more you learn about it, the more kind of interesting questions appear. And it's also, I think, a fairly understudied species in a lot of ways. Like there's some really good research going on with horned larks, but there's also a lot that we don't know about horned larks. And so with that first project, I learned a bit about the ecology and natural history of the species and developed those ideas into more kind of full-grown projects that I'm still working on. Honestly, I have projects that from my grad school that I'm not completely finished, but yeah, it's been really fun to have kind of a series of research projects focused on different aspects of their biology. But it all got started just through a summer internship that then kind of expanded from there.
So RJ and Amanda, you guys have you guys seen horned larks?
No, we have
No.
not. Yeah.
You've been close to them.
Yeah.
Did they get onto the shores of the lake near Chicago there, or Lake Shore?
You know, I feel like they're kind of mercurial here along the lakeshore. I mean, so for instance, in the places I go birding most, I actually have not had them, even though other people have. So they come through, but you know, you get out into the fields. I mean, that's the thing about this bird. So they're an open country bird, and unlike almost any other species I can think of, they probably actually benefited almost from cropland or at least they've adapted to it in ways that have kept them going pretty strongly across everywhere they live in this huge distribution.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, so in the Western US, where there's been conversion of a lot of native land into agriculture, there's examples of horned larks that have changed in terms of their diet and their phenotype as agriculture has kind of increased in the area. And then what's interesting, so I always like to think about the etymology of names. And so Aremophila, Aram is, I guess, like desert or kind of wilderness. And then phyla is an affinity for. And so the genus is sort of like a desert philic species. And then the specific epithet alpestris means of the mountains or the Alps, I guess. And so its name describes a pretty big breadth of habitats. And so in general, they like areas with little to no vegetation. I've shown some of the field sites where I've worked at, and they just kind of look like dirt lots, like parking lots. Like they're not very striking in terms of their vegetation. But they can be super variable, their habitats, in terms of elevation. Like there's populations at really high elevations. There's populations on coastlines in Southern California. There's populations that are in the high latitude tundras and others that are in deserts. And so this breadth of habitats and ecology that they exhibit is really fascinating. And there's been some cool work in terms of physiology that I haven't done, but that folks in Europe have done, focusing on larks. And they seem to be a species that, or a lineage, I guess, more broadly thinking about the family Alaudidae, that is really good at inhabiting kind of arid environments. And so they have some interesting physiological adaptations for that. And they're the only, kind of another cool thing biogeographically, is that they're the only member of their family Alaudidae in the Western Hemisphere. And so larks at the family level are about 100 species, mostly Eurasian and African. But then the horned lark has been super successful at colonizing all sorts of areas in a really kind of short evolutionary time frame. So the crown age, or the kind of estimate of the most recent common ancestor for the whole genus, is 1.5 million years or so, based on a mitochondrial molecular clock. And that's like that sounds like a long time, but it's really recent in terms of like the ability to naturally colonize, almost every continent and have such a different breadth of habitats that it has successfully colonized and then adapted to. And that part, I think, is really exciting to think about in terms of the biology of the bird.
Shannon,
Do
you know how many specimens we have?
I do. We have 1,769.
So
specimens.
I went through
that
this
surprised
morning.
me too. I didn't realize we had quite that many.
So here's the other thing about that. So because I was thinking about it and went through and counted, and we have specimens from 18 countries and 38 states.
Wow.
Louisiana, I think, is not one of them.
Yeah, they're pretty uncommon here. Yeah,
but they occur. I mean, the thing is, like this is like.
Yeah. One of the other neat things about their biology is they're kind of nomadic in nature, and they tend to be a species that aggregates in sort of medium-sized flocks, sometimes large flocks. But I think that's maybe part of why they've been so successful at naturally kind of expanding their range, is that they move around a lot, just kind of intrinsically and in search of resources and habitat that they like. And then when they do find it, they kind of tend to show up in large enough numbers that they can establish a population.
And
And
hence their
so,
name Lark. That's where lark comes from. It's like they're on a lark, right? They're going and
yeah, kind of on a whim. Yeah.
larking about and finding new places and stuff. And honestly, that's where the common name comes from.
So
Oh,
on the
cool.
Channel Islands, are they permanent residents? Do you think they're coming and going?
So their migratory patterns are pretty complicated too. So, in some parts of their distribution, they seem to be residents year round. I think there's partial migration in some, and so it's like some individuals, whether that's certain age classes or sexes or proportions thereof, decide to migrate, where other ones will stay. In the Channel Islands, I think they're residents, but we did, at least with the genetic data that we generated, did find some evidence that there's some movement gene flow between the continental populations and the island populations. But in terms of seasonal migration, I think the Channel Islands ones are resident for the most part.
I when I read Nick's research, the things he did for his dissertation and beyond, I think that project couldn't have been done 20 years ago, because the genomic tools that he has access to now to study these questions of gene flow or of the evolution of different colors and patterns on these birds, it required the development of all of these other genomic tools. And so it's so of the time, and then again using specimens that go back through history.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
what did
that's
you think was going to happen when you started? Did you make predictions about what you might find? I mean, were you out to use genomics to look at plumage variation and adaptation on such a local scale?
well, we haven't quite done that yet. So in terms of like trying to find like the loci or genes that are associated with plumage adaptation, but there's a postdoc, Johanna Beam, who's kind of carrying the torch on that element of kind of population comparative genomics of some adaptations in horned larks. So it'll be exciting to figure out what they find out. But in terms of what I was expecting, it was sort of just like a breadcrumb type situation, in that I kind of just followed the next one, and from there, some of the things I think were perhaps more easily predicted, like that they have camouflage, right? So one of the studies that we've done sort of used museum specimens to quantify the brightness and hue and patterning of their dorsal plumage, and then see how that's associated with soil conditions throughout their range. And if you were to ask any birder, like, do horned larks have camouflage, they would probably say yes. that they pretty nicely match their background, and they can blend in pretty well. But what was cool with that project is that you can quantify it, and you can demonstrate using things, combining data like remote sensing data with specimens that are from all over the continent, perhaps even all over the world, and for which we now have these GIS-based data sets on kind of local environmental conditions. And you can find pretty tight associations describing geographic variation in their plumage. And so in that way, I had a hunch, hypothesis, as that there was going to be some plumage environment associations, but it was really fun to see it kind of play out in a quantitative way.
And I still think the what you just said, like the local scale aspects of that associated with different colors of soils, even across a pretty small geography, is going to be fun to see what comes out of that from the genetic basis of how selection works. Because again, it's dramatic, and that's really to me is just surprising. I mean, it's one thing if you're a mouse on a lava flow, I can see where that gets to be selection to give you a darker colored animal over time. But the horned larks are just using the spatial environment so differently than this mouse would, that it's just, and yet it's clear that level of matching associated with the soils is really important to them.
I mean, I always think that what a time frame that is too, right? So how long have humans been altering the landscape to make soils that they're using for agriculture, and they're darker when they do that, and the birds got darker to match the soil over very short periods of time. They got darker. And yeah, and it's always good, you're right, Nick, to actually demonstrate that mathematically and scientifically, not just for people to think it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That example that you're alluding to is in the Colorado Desert of Southern California in Imperial Valley. I don't know if any of y'all ever been there, but the Salton Sea is kind of a birding hotspot and is a migratory stopover site for a lot of birds on the West Coast. And in the 60s and maybe 70s, it kind of became this vacation destination in a way, and that people would go there and hang out at the shores of the Salton Sea. But it's a pretty gnarly place because there's a lot of like agricultural runoff and just it's like a hypersaline body of water that, if you go back in time, like tens thousands of years, at one point was an actual body of water, but since then has now dried up. But in the early 1900s, they developed the All-American Canal, which diverted water from the Colorado River to that area for agriculture. And in so doing, this basin of water filled up and just started to accumulate chemicals over time and become hypersaline. And, so if you go there now, you'll see that there's sort of carcasses of fishes littering the shores, and it's not like a nice vacation destination by any means.
It's also getting a heck of a lot warmer as climates change. It is. It gets super hot there in the summer.
Oh, wow.
It does. So the larks in that area, there's also agriculture there too now. And so the larks, people were collecting larks there for whatever reason in like the early 1900s and 1910, 1920. And so we were able to compare larks that we collected there 100 years later to that historical series and show that they're getting darker over time. It's not as pronounced as, like, I don't know if you know the peppered moth example with the Industrial Revolution and like the white and black morphs. That's sort of like a evolutionary story of how the Industrial Revolution impacted natural selection on these native populations of moths. So it's not quite that dramatic in terms of a light morph and a dark morph, but there is still some evidence that the birds that are there are changing over time. And what we don't know is if that's because of like selection acting on standing variation in that population, or if it's like other individuals moving into the area, perhaps from outside of the Imperial Valley. So there's still some uncertainty in terms of the processes that are generating that pattern.
See, this is why you do these projects, so you can get into something where you can just keep working on it, because there's lots of neat stuff to learn.
Yeah, it's been super fun to do. Yeah, and one of the other things we've shown with that same series is that their diet might have shifted, and so horned larks, they can eat seeds, they can eat insects, and there's some evidence that changes seasonally with when they're in their reproductive season or when they're rearing young. But they're fairly adaptable in terms of how much seeds or insects their diet is comprised of. And we've shown that with stable isotopes that the sort of breadth of their niche has changed over time. And so current larks that are in the agricultural area seem to have a narrower niche breadth. And so they might be specializing on insects or seeds that are especially abundant in agricultural areas where there's a few crops that are widespread in the area and have a kind of specific type of caterpillar or seeds that the horned lark seem to really like.
I think of larks as happy birds because of their
like that. Yeah,
behaviors
that's great.
because of their behaviors in the sky. I mean, they might look dull when you pick one up and look at it up close, but if you were to put your binoculars on one that was displaying in the air, you wouldn't think of them as dull like that. They seem so happy in the air. Yeah.
I just want to point
Yeah, they've
but they're happy in the middle of an agricultural field.
Well, okay, people are happy in lots of places where the environment's not that great, right? Don't you look? You, glass half full person, you're making me the glass more than half full in this area. This is a role reversal that seems kind of weird. But
Nick,
yeah,
I've got
happy.
to ask. Nick, I've got to ask. What
Sure.
does the horn serve any purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great
It
question.
took
To
an
me,
hour to get to this.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Maybe we should have started with that. Yeah. To me, they kind of remind me of like Wolverine and X-Men. They kind
Yeah.
of got like the Logan look, like
Yeah.
the little horns on either side.
Yes.
So they're dimorphic. So it's just the males that have those.
Okay.
The females do not have the horns. And there's a few other species in the family that have these horns. And one of the other ways in which horned larks vary among their populations is in their facial patterns. And so I think it's probably related to sexual selection in a way, but often we kind of wave our hands when we have things like this and say it's sexual selection without knowing specifically how it might be related to mate choice. But that's probably what's going on with the horns in the male horned larks. Yeah.
Are they only
But
there
there's-
during breeding, or do the males
No,
have
they have them.
No.
Yeah, so they have them year round. So larks are a bird that only molt once per year, pretty much, and so they don't really have like the basic and alternate plumage that a lot of other birds do. So they've kind of just got one outfit for the whole year, and yeah, so they've got those horns year round.
Do
and I just
RJ, I
females
think-
prefer bigger horns?
Well,
What was that?
There you
Sorry,
go.
Yes. I said, do females prefer bigger horns?
That's a great question. I don't know if that's ever been tested.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's some classic like behavioral ecology studies on looking at exaggerated traits in other birds, but I don't think we know in horned larks sort of what the preference is.
I think you have to step back in time to know that before, because there's something about that lineage that lets them make horns, because more than horned larks have horns. And so what makes that lineage of birds able to, make a little tuft of feathers that is differently colored and sticks out from the top of a bird's head? I have no idea, but
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to also circle back to plasticity in this bird, because we've talked about them in Southern California and in areas that get well over 100 degrees on a regular basis. You also see them wintering in Wisconsin and in the crops, in the cornfields, in areas where it can be minus 20 with the wind chill. So these guys are just like, I was thinking about this. I'm not sure there's another bird that is capable of dealing with a broader spectrum of temperature.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Some of the hottest places in North America and some of the coldest places in North America
Yeah.
is in the same
Wow.
species.
That's
And I
crazy.
don't know exactly what combination of traits is allowing him to do that. I think it's a lot of things related to physiology and evaporative water loss and those really hot environments, and circulation and keeping body temperature in those super cold climates. I don't really know how they're doing it either. I mean, they can fluff their feathers up and help maintain the hot air around their skin, but it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and they're not doing it. Behaviorally, there are probably a few things like that they can do, but in terms of like finding warmer spots, I mean, they're out in these open farm fields. You look for them in the winter in the most open, windswept areas. That's where you're going to find them. And so
I don't.
Mhm.
Nick, what's the coolest thing about horned larks? Like, what do you go to bed thinking about?
Yeah, let's see. The coolest thing, we've sort of alluded to it, but to me, I think they're just a really fun group to think about sort of evolutionary processes at a really broad geographic scale.
Okay.
And so that's kind of a very biologist rather than birder answer. But,
Okay.
I think thinking about trying to reconstruct their evolutionary history and thinking about how they might have colonized all these different areas and how the populations are changing now. One of the cool things is they've got populations that are in Colombia, for example, and like the nearest neighboring population is in southern Mexico. And so they don't exist in any of Central America, but it's kind of a fun puzzle to think about in terms of, well, how did that happen and when did it happen? And you can sort of extrapolate those kind of questions to this lineage that's super widespread and has done so in a really short evolutionary time frame. So
Very cool.
as an evolutionary biologist, that's kind of what gets me most excited when I think about horned larks.
Yeah. Yeah, that is super interesting. Very cool. You sold me.
Plus, it'll potentially get into Colombia and Mexico.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think we're unfortunately getting kind of close on time. Is there anything else we wanted to touch on Horned Larks or on anything else, Nick, while we got you?
No, this has been great. I think, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, and it's an exciting species in that there's a lot of ongoing work with them too. I'm not sort of leading some of that right now, but it'll be exciting to see what other people find out with some of these new tools, whole genome sequencing, and all the different things that we can bring to shed light on their biology. So, but yeah, thanks for the opportunity to chat with you all about horned larks. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been so great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Anything we want to plug? LSU in general?
Well, if
Go
you like
visit the
birds,
museum.
and yeah, come visit us at the museum. We've got a great collection. If you're someone thinking about studying birds, we've got a great grad program, great undergrad program. So come visit Louisiana. It's fun. You can see lots of cool birds and come visit a cool museum.
I mean, we have
Awesome. Sounds
graduate
fun.
students who came from there as undergrads. So, Jacob Cooper and Marky Muchler, they came as undergrads.
Oh, wow.
Into
Very
our
cool.
program. So that's what I say is just all these circular intersecting connections that, they train us, then we go take those things and train other people, and then everybody starts intersecting. Like then our graduate students go to LSU, and then their graduate students come here, and it's good. So if you train people well, they train people well, and then your people are all over the place.
And
I mean,
Nick has 2 colleagues who are ornithologists at the museum, and there's at least one other faculty member now, I think, a Bolivian.
Yeah.
So it's just a great place for ornithology. Absolutely great.
Awesome.
Yeah, it really is. And there's folks outside the museum too. We've got Renewable Natural Resources, our sort of sister department, and there's a lot of great ecologists over there. So yeah, it's a fun, really dynamic place for studying birds.
I mean,
I
for
will
me,
say that y'all have a huge fan base here too at LSU. A ton
Ooh.
of the grad
Oh,
students
awesome.
have expressed how much they like the podcast. They're actually the ones that put me onto it first. So,
Oh.
Sweet.
so
boy,
if you ever get a heat map of your listeners, I'm sure Baton Rouge will
well,
pop up.
Oh,
at
as,
first, the only
an
heat map
outlier.
we saw were where our families were. That was
Yeah.
the heat map.
Yeah.
So a small bit of British Columbia, a bit west of there in British Columbia.
A little bit of Colorado, a little bit of northern Chicago suburbs.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, now you're
mean-
getting folks from the Netherlands tuning in too.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
You're right, Nick. Yeah.
Yeah.
People have been super nice too. And again, if you want to feel better about the world, you'll take a look at how nice people have been in communicating with us. It's really great. And you should, if your graduate students want to come and talk about their dissertations, I mean, it would be great to have them come on, pick a species, tell us what they're doing. I think it's
they would love it. Sure.
one of the reasons I thought about doing this is when COVID came, I was very concerned about the way I was hearing some of the students talk. Too many filler words, too many ums and likes. And then I thought, well, do I do that too? And I went to a couple of online kind of trainings associated with speaking and being comfortable with there being pauses. And I think giving students the opportunity to do that, they get practice so that when they're in a situation when it really counts, I mean, it doesn't count that much if they're on a podcast with us, but when they're interviewing for jobs or giving a job seminar or talking to a potential donor somewhere or talking to a potential graduate student or postdoctoral advisor, it really helps to have had practice speaking about what it is you do in a way that almost anybody should be able to understand. So yeah,
Yeah, totally agree.
So it would be
I mean,
great.
if you're ever looking for other guests to have on, we have a ton of people here who would love to do it, I'm sure, and
Awesome.
Yeah, we
have
love that.
expertise in all sorts of different species and stories and
Sweet.
fun things to share. So
Yeah.
I bet they would love to do that.
Yeah, I want to hear camping stories. Like,
Oh man, well, some of those are probably not suitable for
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
A little spicy for
Exactly. That's what I
for
want.
the general audience.
Oh, wow. We got to
I want to hear
do an
more
episode
about
on that.
Yeah.
No, Nick, you'll have
We're
to
not-
contribute.
We're
I
not
don't
gonna
know
do
those
that.
stories.
Oh,
No,
darn.
yeah, I'll yeah, sorry. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so
Well,
much,
I
Nick.
mean, I
this has
think
been
it's
so
great.
great.
Thank you so much.
I
Nick.
think it's
Yeah.
great that LSU's bird collections are in the hands of people like you and Greg. So I think those things are really important.
Yeah, thank you. That means a lot. And honestly, it means a lot to get the chance to be on the podcast. I have tons of respect and admiration for John and Shannon, and really do enjoy the podcast. Truly, it's I look forward to listening to it. So I really appreciate the opportunity to contribute.
Oh,
Well,
thank you so
hopefully,
much.
if you have sleep
Yeah,
trouble,
thank
it
you.
puts you
Awesome.
to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Not you guys. That's me.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Just a fun update. Nick's students are going to be voting on our March Madness bird bracket. We'll share the bracket on our social media. Next week, we'll start reading the results, and we'll be voting ourselves live on the episode as well, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right, we love you all, and thanks, everyone, for listening.